Well, we're just coming off of a fantastic weekend, a 50th anniversary celebration. It was just wonderful. And I wake up this morning and lo and behold in the news, they're saying we're looking for a double-dip recession. The regulatory red tape is killing our economy, and a growing number of small and medium-sized banks may be going out of business. It's
incredible, Pat. In fact, they say that the heavy regulations imposed by a law called Dodd-Frank is actually making it tougher for them to do business. Heather Sells has that story.
For mortgage lender Robin Aukie, the new regulations mean more time for every loan she closes.
So it has probably added, on the average, I'd say minimum 20 to 25 pages for every file that's done.
And Aukie says the extra paperwork translates into an extra hour for every loan. That's time and money lost for her small bank. Her counterpart, commercial lender Derek Tinsley, says the business owners he works with are not happy with the extra work they now have to do to get a loan.
The consumer, they get upset because they feel like they're having to jump through every single hoop. I'm just borrowing $10,000.
At the heart of the matter lies the Dodd-Frank Act. Congress passed it after some of the world's largest financial firms collapsed or came close to in 2008 and 9. Lawmakers hope to reform financial regulation, but in doing so, they created a mountain of new regulatory burdens. Imagine having to decipher more than 4,800 pages of proposed or final rules. The hardest hit? Small and medium-sized banks.
When you have 37 employees and 4,000 pages to read, and you also have to run a bank, how are you going to do that?
Susan Ralston, president of Bank Atlantic, says she had to hire an outside firm just to keep her bank on top of all the new rules. Even so, she says they are not only affecting her lenders, they're affecting her ability to launch new loans.
It will take more time to bring a product to market. And that will affect the consumer because, certain products are rate driven or, just a sign of maybe a cyclical product that needs to be out there. And you might miss the beat.
There is so much concern about banking regulation right now that it has become a presidential campaign issue already. All the GOP candidates say if elected, they will repeal the Dodd-Frank Act.
They have been hearing on the campaign trail from people in the financial industry that this law is very destructive.
Peter Wallison helped to oversee banking deregulation as part of the Reagan administration. And he says presidential politics could make all the difference for this latest regulatory round. Already, the GOP is working to delay implementation of the bill. And if a Republican makes it to the White House in 2012, that could spell the end of Dodd-Frank.
The presidential election is the most important thing that will happen on the question of whether Dodd-Frank survives.
In the meantime, banks across the country must contend not only with regulatory overload, but with an economy that's sputtering at best.
When you go into a meeting with a bunch of bank presidents, it's like everybody needs Prozac or something. It's very depressing because we don't see a big turnaround in our economy yet. We're not feeling it.
And there's concern about the unintended consequences of Dodd-Frank. It could, say bankers, promote the growth of large banks able to absorb all the red tape and lead to the end of hometown banks as we've known them.
I think you're going to have a lot of small banks say, I've just had enough. I can't do this. There's no way I can survive.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Regulation run amok. And it's not just regulation. It is criminal penalties that have been attached to law after law after law. And I just was reading a couple of days ago that there used to be something called mens rea, which meant that you understood that you were breaking a law, that you were committing a crime. Now, some courts have ruled in some of these laws you don't have to intend anything. It just happens and you go to jail. And there are thousands now, not a few, but thousands of laws that put people in jail. Thousands of regulations beyond measure. And Congress, it's just like they went crazy. You turn a bunch of Democrats loose with a Democrat president, and they have socialist tendencies, and they just run amok. And that's what you've had. We had one crazy guy on an airplane with a bomb in his shoe. One. Now, everybody who ever flies an airplane or in the United States got to take his shoes off or her shoes off. And people going around barefoot and everything on these dirty floors. I mean, it's terrible. One man. You have a couple of businesses like Enron that went sour. And instead of dealing with the problem that we could do that, we have broad, sweeping legislation that locks up the banks and thousands of, so the average person who's looking for a little loan, $10,000, $20,000, can't get the money. The people, the bankers can't handle it. And I say it's just not the Enron thing, it's the financial mess that was there. But why was the mess there? It was there because Barney Frank, the author of Dodd-Frank, insisted on Fannie and Freddie making loans to everybody so that they could spread the joy of homeownership. That's where it came from. It was pressure from the government to do improvident banking, and all of a sudden we've all got to pay the price for it. We've got to rein that stuff in, ladies and gentlemen. It's serious. It's going to affect your pocketbook and my pocketbook and everybody's pocketbook. Well, Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee.
Pat, a highly respected economic research group says the U.S. is slipping into another recession, and there's nothing policymakers can do to head it off. The Economic Cycle Research Institute has correctly predicted the last 3 recessions. It says the upcoming recession means that the jobless rate, already above 9%, will go much higher, and the federal budget deficit, already above $1 trillion, will soar. Pat?
I was talking to our producer earlier today. I said, what are we going to do? And the right answer was that those who've got money are going to make out like bandits. And I don't know if that helps anybody else, but let me warn you right now, if you possibly can, get out of debt, get as liquid as you possibly can, and get ready for some serious economic storms. And they won't just be here in America, it'll be all around the world, because Europe is in serious trouble, and the Chinese may well go into some kind of recession as well. And who is the engine of growth? Or where is it? Lee?
Pat, as many as 500 churches across the country took part in Pulpit Freedom Sunday this weekend, a time for pastors to speak freely about political candidates from the pulpit. The IRS bans pastors from supporting or opposing candidates. The goal of this pulpit initiative is to have that law declared unconstitutional. The Alliance Defense Fund started the program in 2008. 33 pastors participated that first year. None of those churches have lost their tax exemptions. Pat?
I've been working on this one we just celebrated 50 years, and I've been at it for probably 45 of those 50. We've been trying to point out the fact that there's something called the Johnson Amendment. Lyndon Johnson got mad at a couple of nonprofits that were going after his senatorial campaign, and he slipped a piece into the Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. It went through without committee discussion, and I don't believe there was much of a debate on the Senate. It was just rolled through the Congress because of his power. And we've been living with that monster ever since. But churches have a right to speak. They shouldn't be muzzled. And the Alliance Defense Fund says, we're going to get a repeal of it. Well, good luck to you in that thing. But who knows? I mean, we might see something. I had gotten something just about teed up, ready to go, until Mr. Gingrich had a thing about getting paid for lectures he made in some nonprofit university down in Georgia, and that blew up. And so everybody says, well, we look like we're partisan. So they decided not to revoke that Johnson Amendment, but it would be just a simple act of Congress, and they could get it out. Not many words, just a short little thing has caused a world of hurt to nonprofits. Lee?
Iran's state media is now claiming that Christian pastor Youssef Nader-Kadi faces the death penalty for rape and extortion, not apostasy. An Iranian official told state media that he's not being tried for being a Christian. He says the pastor is guilty of security-related crimes. The American Center for Law and Justice posted an English translation of an Iranian Supreme Court ruling on the case. The group says the Iranians may be adding new charges against the pastor or simply just trying to deflect growing international attention. You can follow our updates on this story at cbnnews.com. Pat?
You know, I said this was a public relations disaster for not only Iran, but the whole Islamic world. They say, well, we're a religion of peace, we're tolerant and all this, and here this guy's going to get hanged because he refuses to renounce his Christianity. And the heat is on. And finally, the president came around, and I think Hillary Clinton may be coming late to the party, but she's going to say something. So all of a sudden, the Iranians say, this is a disaster. We'd better back off. So instead of backing off and saying, well, we found that he didn't really violate Islamic principles or whatever they want to say to cover up themselves, they've now said, well, he raped somebody. That man hadn't raped anybody, but it just makes them look silly. But they are so brutal. It is so brutal. Now, this is what happens when you have a theocracy under Islam. This is a theocratic government run by the mullahs. Ahmadinejad is more of a figurehead, and it is not a secular government. It is an Islamic republic, and that's what they call it. And this is the kind of activity that goes on in such a country. Lee?
Defense Secretary Leon Panetta warns that Israel is becoming isolated in the Middle East. He says the nation jeopardizes its own security if it does not reach out to its neighbors. Panetta says Israel needs to restart Palestinian peace talks and should work to restore its relationship with Egypt and Turkey. Panetta made the comments Sunday on his way to Israel. He will meet with Israeli and Palestinian leaders this week. His visit comes as Middle East negotiators push for a peace deal by the end of next year. Millions of Christians around the world joined the Global Day of Prayer for the Peace of Jerusalem Sunday. Julie Stahl tells us why this year's event took on special significance.
This is the day of prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hundreds of Christians in Jerusalem joined participants from 175 nations and more than 300,000 churches for this year's event. The inspiration comes from Psalm 122, verse 6, which says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper who love you." Organizers say the event is the largest Jerusalem-focused prayer initiative in the world. Robert Stearns told CBN News prayer is especially important now due to the growing tension between Israel and its neighbors and enemies.
We've got to pray for truth and discernment, and that's why I encourage people to become educated on these issues.
Knesset member Gila Gamliel says she came to bless the Christians.
I want to thank all of them about all their support and the prayer, and this is why we are very strong here in Israel.
Columnist Michael Freund says it's very moving to see such strong solidarity with Christians around the world.
All of us who love Israel and support Israel, now is the time to turn to the Creator and to plead with him to have mercy on his people Israel.
Reverend David Pileggi says God loves the Jewish people, so Christians should too.
Probably one of the most important things we can do for the Jewish people, and one of the most practical things we can do, is pray.
Stearns says the way the world looks at Jerusalem daily is almost lifted from the pages of Scripture.
I certainly believe we're living in prophetic times. Surely part of what God's saying to the church today in the world has to do with the city of Jerusalem.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And Pat, back to you.
Thanks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our prayers are with our Jewish friends, and I see storm clouds rising over that country in Israel, and they need the prayers of all God's people. And this day of prayer was wonderful, organized by thousands and thousands of churches all over the world.
The Christian film Courageous had a strong debut at this weekend's box office. The movie finished number 5 with $8.8 million, but the film was number 1 in terms of earnings per theater, bringing in nearly $7,600 at each movie house. Other films made more money because they played on 2 to 3 times as many screens. The film is an action-packed police drama. It tells the story of a police officer who excels at work but struggles to connect with his teenage son at home. The film was produced by filmmakers at Sherwood Baptist Church in Albany, Georgia. They also made Fireproof and Facing the Giants. CBN launches the 700 Club Canada today. The new series is produced by and for Canadians. It will air weekdays nationwide on both Joy TV and Vision TV. The 700 Club Canada is much like this program, only geared toward a Canadian audience. Hosting the new series is Brian Warren there on the left and Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson. Warren is a former professional football player, and Laura Lynn is a nationally known television host. CBN's goal is that the program will act as an inspiration and faith builder across Canada. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging onto our website at cbn.com/international.